Thanks for coming, everyone. Welcome to the everyone.
Crowd goes wild.
Welcome to the Paddle Sports Zone at the Outdoor Retailer Show. My name's Scott McGregor. I'm the founder and publisher of Rapid Media, which means I get to do a whole bunch around the office here. But we produce Rapid Adventure Kayak, Canoe Routes, Kayak Angler. Stop me if I'm saying the same thing twice. We do Paddling Buyer's Guide, Paddling Trip Guide, Paddling Business magazines, and then we also do the Real Paddling Film Festival. What that means is I get to work with a whole bunch of manufacturers and retailers and the consumer. So I've lined up a whole bunch of fantastic panelists here from the industry. The topic we're going to, when I'm chatting with all these folks, the thing that often comes up in conversation is, and they don't say these exact words, but it boils down to where have all the good staff gone in the outdoor industry. So I stole that title, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So that my panelists here are James, let me put my glasses on here. James Donovan, just put your hand up down there. Did I get the name right? The third. I just want to make sure it's the third. You're the C4 Waterman brand manager. Adam Masters to my left here is the founder of Bellyak. And I want to kind of say here, you also kind of grew up in this industry a little bit. His dad is Bill Masters of Perception Kayaks fame. So you have a different perspective than the rest of us. Emily Bronson Blair, marketing communications specialist for Johnson Outdoors. Marcel, how do you say your last name? Beeg, all right. ACA Western States Outreach Director and former Outdoor Ed Center Program Director. So that's a couple perspectives there. And, oh, hey, there you are. Laurel King, who I met this morning at breakfast. How crazy is this? She's the founder, I mean, say you're the founder, but certainly the owner of the OutdoorIndustryJobs.com website.
Yes.
So, great. So let's set the stage a little bit here. I think the present and near future of paddle sports, certainly in retail, branding, media guiding, and instruction, depends on millennials. I don't think we can do it without them. So a millennial is anybody born roughly between 1980 and 2000s. So this means this is people from anywhere from 17 to 35, and I think specifically we're talking about people in their 20s. When you're in the teens, are kind of like the next, but anybody in their 20s. So that's kind of what we're talking about right now, that group of folks we need in our businesses in that age category. So this means, in my world, that everybody but my wife and I and the Rapid Media team and one sales guy named Kevin, everybody else is a millennial. Probably like your teams, it's a big chunk of the folks that we work with. So too often these discussions end up being millennial bashing, which we can get to later because I brought two of them along here for the ride. Yep. So, but before we get to that, I think it's important to remember how paddle sports was developed. And I think one of the topics I want to throw out to you guys is that most of us came from the outdoor industry, or came from the outdoors into the industry. We were enthusiasts. We were into the sport, and when we came there, at least back when I was in my 20s, that's how it worked. So I feel that this is different now, or a little bit different, and I wanted to throw this to the panel. And is this different? And if it is different, how is that changing the workforce and how we're engaging folks? And we don't need to do this fancy up and down. We can pass the mics around. I'm just going to let anybody jump in here.
How did you get into the industry?
Should I talk into the microphone?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is James Donovan. So I started paddling outrigger canoe. I'm from Ventura, California, home of Patagonia. And so I started paddling outrigger canoe when I was about 14 years old. And it was always a fun thing to do. There was never any chance of professionalism in paddling, which is a stand-up industry. Had a little stint there of that for about 1 or 2 years. And now that's gone. So, but yeah, I started paddling, and then I moved to Hawaii for my first year of college, and then moved back to California, and then was down in Los Angeles paddling with Danny Ching, one of the best paddlers on a stand-up or outrigger, and he took me under his wing and really brought me to where I am. And then after college, I actually studied geography in school, so I was into the outdoors, just not the actual industry. I didn't really know more than the retail shop end of it, because I was working in retail stand-up paddle shops in Los Angeles. And then I moved to Honolulu and hooked up with Todd Bradley and started working for C4 Waterman, which is owned by Winona Canoe. And then about December of 2016, I moved back to California and tried at the sales rep gig. And the state of stand-up paddle in Southern California is pretty dire. So I talked to Bill Keeper and Mike Chickanowski, and they said, "Oh, why don't you come back to Winona, Minnesota?" And I said, "Well, maybe in the summer I'll go, but we'll see about the winter." So and now I'm basically running the everything from social media for C4 Waterman all the way to, I'm racing in the national championships for flat marathon canoe next weekend in Dubuque, Iowa. So I just really enjoy paddling, and so that's how I got into it. And as far as, but that's the thing, when I was paddling outrigger, even when I was in college in LA, Danny's wife said, James, you got to find something that you like as much as paddling, but you can do as a career. And there was no sense of that there was an outdoor industry, really, which is profound, because she's a nurse, and obviously, Danny owns his own stand-up paddle company, but, there was this disconnect between having a fun job and having a job that you could actually eat with. So I've been able to do it, and I think I'm pretty lucky for the life I've lived so far, to be able to not only paddle for fun, but kind of paddle as a job in a sense. It's my whole life, every day. So I feel like that's definitely improved not only my race results, but just my happiness. I'm not doing something for 8 hours a day then paddling. It's kind of like, well, I get to talk about it all day and then go do it and put it into action. And people say, well, what do you do for fun? I say, well, I paddle. Yeah. And well, what else? No, then I sleep and eat, So, yeah.
Cool.
Here, take this one.
Oh, I'll take this one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, you hear me?
I did.
We're sure he shared. He's good. Obviously, I'm a little bit older than the rest of you, and when I was starting out, I was always a very active outdoor person, but the outdoor world or outdoor recreation industry wasn't really developed. So I had to find my way eventually getting here, and it didn't really happen until I was in my 40s, because in the 70s or 30s maybe, the 70s, paddling was just starting, but so was bicycling and all these things. I mean, the industry wasn't developed. There's no snowboarding, no mountain biking. Paddling was very, like maybe some of the rafting companies had, start out in the 70s, and they were teachers who started, and canoeing was around. So I was a physical education major. I majored in PE and tried to teach a little bit. I didn't really care for that. And I started leading bicycle tours for a living. So the whole industry has just changed so much in front of my eyes, including the opportunities for people like you to make a living out of it. I had to struggle for quite a long time to get to this point. So I had a big website company where we did a lot of outdoor websites. A lot of these people were our clients. We had a big portal before Google came along, and I met a lot of people in the industry, particularly the paddling. We did a lot of websites for adventure travel, for whitewater rafting companies. We sold ads. So I have a real love for the outdoor world and in the paddling because of that. And I learned a lot of internet marketing, so I was able to fit in and start really coming to these shows. This is my 42nd outdoor retailer show. So I've kind of been around the block, and I've seen, and it's so great that you guys have these opportunities, and you can be so flexible and moving around and trying out all these things, new equipment, make a living out of what you're doing. And I wish that I had that opportunity when I was younger, because I would have gone along further, faster, I think, in this world. So,
Is the industry big enough now that there aren't enough outdoorsy people that we need to hire outside of it? So it started with outdoor enthusiasts building an industry, right? That was the beginning of all this.
Right.
Are we big enough now that there aren't enough, or that we need to start looking outside and bringing in marketing experts? And
well, I just have one comment on that. That is the reason I started OutdoorIndustryJobs.com, because I had all kinds of people working in cubicles, have this passion, and this gave them the connection. And I think you need new blood to come in, because you get kind of in your own world and not seeing that outside influence and good business skills coming into the industry. I think it's super important to hire people from outside who have a passion. That's my personal opinion. So.
Yeah, so interesting on that. As a professional educator, more so than a retailer in this particular side, working with college students, there's a whole program, a whole system out there with the college world and outdoor education that allows folks to get this education and then move into the outdoor industry, whether it be designing or retail or guiding or educating, whatever it may be. The one thing that I think is different than it used to be, or that we're seeing now, is that a lot of these programs that exposed young people to the outdoors that eventually wanted to make it a profession, these programs are actually not as prevalent as they once were, especially in the higher education side of things. Lots of programs are closing down. We all know that education funding is a big challenge in our country and things like that. So a lot of times it's these outdoor programs, these programs that get people into the field and educate them, foster that passion, that's just not as available in a lot of ways, or to as many people, just simply because of the cost of some of these opportunities. So it's going to be interesting to try to continue that passion and keep finding those people that are passionate about that are about, doing this stuff and continuing to build this industry, I think. So
I can definitely speak to that myself. I got into outdoor industry and the fun of the outdoors through an educational program. So I went to a summer camp growing up, and it was at first not something I wanted to do. I was signed up for it, and I didn't choose to do it myself, but I had previously been signed up for another activity by my father to learn how to paddle in a public pool. And so it was going to a summer program, paddling a two-person canoe by myself and learning that it's not the end of the world. I can do this. And then he sent me to this camp, and I didn't really want to go, but I went anyway. And I really discovered my love for the outdoors and for paddling and for rock climbing and for hiking. But for me, it wasn't something that I ever thought or saw or even dreamed of being a job. And it wasn't until the position became available in my area, which I live in Maine. Like, it's very difficult to find a really great job with this. I work for Johnson Outdoors, so it's a giant company, but it's a very niche job to be able to find. And I got incredibly lucky that I was known in our area for special events and marketing and advertising. So I actually came in not from the outdoor world, but was able to combine something that I really loved and enjoyed into a part of a job that I actually already knew how to do and was qualified for. So it's kind of the opposite side of it from where you came in, where it was your passion that you were able to turn into a job. I was able to come back to it through a job.
So I grew up completely discouraged from kayaking, even though my dad was became the largest manufacturer of kayaks in the world. He was more from the manufacturing side of it, developing the sport from the base. And I think that's what I want to tell you about, is we talk about growing people and getting new people into this. And it's all about making the sport accessible. So before my dad came along, there were a few people making boats out of plastic. And then when he started to make them out of plastic, they were more affordable, they were more durable. So we're building this base of the sport. So my passion, I loved kayaking early. My dad always told me, don't be like all these people staying at our house who kayak the world because they're just lifestylers. So in my mind, I was like, well, I could never be a professional kayaker because you can't make a living doing it. Well, looking now, we've had a lot of people who've created careers within the sport and the industry. I worked at an outdoor store to fuel my passion to be around the industry and to see it. And then going to college, teaching more people how to actually paddle. And what I've seen and what I've done in the sport is I never intended to get into paddle sports, but I knew the biggest impediment to teaching people how to paddle was the spray skirt and teaching them how to roll. So I think what we see now is stand-up paddleboarding. What we see now with the proliferation of low-cost product is we really are building a sport. And what Marcel does, what the ACA does, increasing paddle sports education is going to create a huge pool of people who we're going to be able to draw from to continue building this industry. So I know some people look in the industry, there shouldn't be $300 kayaks. I look at that as an opportunity to create new users, to create more education. So if we talk about millennials getting into the sport and they have a short attention span and they only like to look at their cell phones, that's great. They can look at their cell phones. We can make an app that teaches them how to paddle, and we can get them into the sport, and then we can draw them through getting into a $300 paddleboard, and then teaching them how to paddle, getting them to become advocates and become passionate players within this field.
So if you Google millennials, it'll give you a description of kind of who these people are, and there's some sweeping generalizations, of course, but one of the things that even when you talk to them, they say we're willing to work hard, and I think they do work hard, but they want meaningful work. So that's pretty great. In my world, we have editors and we create magazines. So if I have a 24-year-old coming out of journalism school, they want to be the editor of the magazine, which is fantastic, and like that's the end game. But what happens? They don't know how to make magazines yet, and they're new, and a lot of them are 24. They don't have a voice of authority in paddle sports because they might only have been doing it a year and a half. So that's great. So in our world, who's gonna apprentice? Who's going to be one of your apprentice instructors? Is that meaningful work? Is retail meaningful work for these folks? Who wants to wash boats after a demo day? So how do we deal with that when the folks that typically did the shit jobs now want truly meaningful work? What does that mean for our industry?
They're all looking at me. Well, we were raised by baby boomers for the most part. I'm 26, born in '91. So we were raised by baby boomers, and a lot of them didn't have the opportunity to go to college. So they were said, oh, go to college and you get a good job. And, typical, okay, they just expect good jobs out of college. But it was true, but I saw it from a different perspective because I went to college, but I, basically double majored in paddling. And so took me 5.5 years, but I did it. And, so I think the only way that you're going to be able to compete with other companies, my dad is vice president of Mission Avocados out of Oxnard, California. And I'm fourth generation agriculture business. I haven't gone into it yet, but people always got to eat, so that's appealing. But again, it's like, how is outdoor industry going to convince someone that starting out at $12 an hour is okay, even though you have a degree, so then you got to work your way up. And like you were saying with your magazine, you're not gonna run the magazine off the bat. If you want to do that, go ahead and start your own magazine, but you need funds to do that too. So it's perplexed because you have a lot of creative types that are my age, and they've either put aside their recreation to get a master's degree in engineering, and now they make six figures making orthoscopic cameras. It's one of my best friends, and so it's very and obviously you can't fight tech. There's no sense in fighting tech. So if we're going to compete with tech, we have to make sure that the baby boomers are giving these kids a chance, and saying, hey, okay, here's your opportunity to work hard. Do you have initiative with all this quote-unquote creativity that you have, and can you complete a job and do it efficiently and do it well? Because, as I said, I'm from Ventura, and Patagonia is king there, and I have a buddy, he's the head of PR there, and I don't feel like I know enough to work for him yet, and that's not the idea of most people my age. They think they could take his job, and they want to get paid twice as much. So it's kind of it's a catch-22. You got to get these, you got to get the right. So I think that's why people that actually grew up, in the outdoor industry, or at least paddling, they go, okay, paddling is not easy. Paddling is cold and it's hard. And sometimes working is cold and hard. They're not going to thank you for everything you do, and you can't expect that. So, and I'm not sure if you guys know Mike Chiganowski, but I paddle marathon canoe with him and his other, friends in his 60s, and I'm the 25-year-old spry young buck that's come to Winona Canoe to, be the next racing generation. So I don't think they saw that coming, but I like it. So.
Do you mind if the other millennial speaks?
Please.
Go for it.
So for me, it's kind of a different perspective. From my perspective, it's more of the don't let that blanket description and definition of a millennial stop you from giving me a chance. All I want to do is be able to get in that door and show you what I can do, because maybe you've heard from 5 other millennials like me, but not all of us want to make sure we're getting a raise right away. Not all of us want to only use your job as a springboard to get on to the next. But I understand also the challenge people are facing to want to hire millennials, because that's what they've seen and that's what they get for an impression of millennials. And unfortunately, I was having a conversation with actually another member of the Rapid Media team, and we were talking about how the participation medals that we received as kids didn't get us ahead in any sort of way. It didn't help us out because just showing up is part of the job description. You join a team, you don't get a medal for showing up, you get a medal for doing well and working with your team together. So it's kind of getting back to basics for people, I think, that are millennials that have to get over the fact that we do need to do the work, we do need to put the time in, and we do need to prove our worth. But in my case, and I think many others, if you give us a shot, we'd like to prove it to you. And that's kind of where we're getting written off because of the blanket feeling toward our generation.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, the river doesn't care if you're millennial, baby boomer, Generation Z, it'll kill you dead. And so I think that's the big thing that, create humility. And so hiring people that may be of any generation that may have the experience, or they're not going to get a participation medal just for going down the river. So I think there's a lot of opportunity recruiting from paddle sports, because I think in general the discipline it takes to be good at paddling will transcend whatever limitation you may have based on the year you're born.
Scott, again, speaking from the education side of things, what I have found with this next generation, or something that's pretty interesting, is that it was very clear that once these individuals were passionate about what they were doing, and then were given the opportunity to foster that passion, there was a clear drive through it. And whether it was crap work or not, what it may be, as long as the end goal was made clear, and the understanding and the expectations. I worked with lots of students that were very focused and very driven to achieve what their goals were in any respect. The problem was if that opportunity fizzled at one spot, one time or another, it seemed that there was, it was sometimes harder to get back on track and then provide that next opportunity. And again, with the education side of thing, one thing that I found very interesting is, when we think about us guys over here, when we think about when we were kids, your mom said, hey, get outside, go do something, take off, find your friends, jump on your bike, do your thing. And that's not that common anymore. Every single moment is scheduled out for kids nowadays. And so they're just used to that process. So it's kind of that, hey, these are the opportunities that exist, and this is what it can be. And if that passion clicks in, they really, really, I find, are driven individuals that can make a big difference and do a great job and thrive in that environment.
I think that's a really good point, because I know, like, when I was growing up, my mother made me get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and go swimming every morning on a swim team. And I didn't like it. But now they're taken everywhere. They're allowed to make choices, at least a generation or two before me. And so they get in a lifestyle like that. And then when they get to the job, they kind of feel, well, that's the way we're going to get that too. I mean, I get to choose what I want to do and when I want to do it. So that's a big transition, I think, mentally for the I can't say that word, millennials, to make that transition. I didn't have that problem at all, because my parents maybe do this, and I grew up in a different generation. So I think I would have the same problem making a commitment, if I were in your shoes and making that type of transition. So that was a really good point you're making there. Yeah.
Lots of what we hear these days is people in their 20s are generalists. They're less likely to be enthusiasts. I mean, there's exceptions to all these rules, of course. But when I was growing up, and you were a paddler, you were a climber, or you were a mountain biker. But you kind of picked, and you got really, really good, and you invested time and effort into getting good at that, and you invested a lot into became who you were and your identity. That's not the case, or as much the case anymore. So how is that affecting? I'll just throw it out here. I don't think that the level of expertise coming into retail and coming into the sport and even instruction, I don't think it's as strong as it used to be. And how is this affecting our different places of work?
I mean, I think the biggest thing it's affecting is that when I go shop at retail 20 years ago, I mean, I'm not that old, I'm only 37, but you could go and the guy who you were buying shoes from, trail ran every day or whatever, that was his passion, and he was able to give you very specific information. Well, now I go online and I read about it. So I don't know if it's so much millennials as it is the proliferation of information that's at our fingertips. That's my 2 cents on that.
I know that for myself, growing up, there were so many options. It was try this, try that. So it wasn't pick one thing and this is your thing and this is going to always be your thing. It was, let's go hiking today. Oh, let's go grab the kayaks and do this tomorrow. And so I think the accessibility and opportunity was bigger, and thus it was less needed to focus on one thing and become really good at it.
So what does that mean now? So now we have a whole bunch of people that are half as good as instructors.
But I think that also when in business, you have to be good at a lot of things and be able to multitask, well, not at the same time, but be able to handle a lot of different things, particularly small businesses. You're doing everything. So if you grow up that way, you're used to it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being a generalist in business. But if you have people coming in and working at your store, you certainly want to have them be an expert, but there are certain needs for every business.
Here's a twist. I think I blame the trends of the outdoor industry because when C4 Waterman started in Hawaii, you couldn't find any of our boards over 28 inches wide because it was a sport that was not easy. And then the Me Too's came along. I got that term from Dave Parmenter, who is the original shaper for us. So all the Me Too's want to paddle. Oh, me too, me too. They're not skilled. They're not good in water. So we start making boards that are 34 inches wide, and they're barges, and they can't perform at all. But everybody can do it with very little skill. And so, you know, and same with surf skis. Once surf skis got a lot easier to paddle, you're starting to get people on these boats and stuff that you're getting thrown into an environment that you shouldn't have been in. So you are able to do a lot of stuff because everything's easy now. And that goes across the board from young people learning it to old people learning new things. Everything has been made easy in the outdoor industry. It's super accessible, but then that goes, hey, I can go on a stand-up paddleboard and I don't have to take a lesson anymore because it's easy. And then I can go trail running because they make shoes that are like cushions. It's not like you have to put in your miles. You can go out and run 10 miles and then put on your compression and you can feel good. You can recover. Everything's been suited to make people weaker, but you can do a lot of different stuff. So like finding, okay, well, I like long distance paddling and there's only one way to get good at that is doing it, But if people just want to, dabble in a bunch of stuff, like be a quote unquote waterman, which has been a term way overused in stand up, and you can, and that's the sad part is you go to these waterman races where you have to be good at everything. It's like, well, I'm pretty uncoordinated at a lot of stuff, but I can paddle pretty good. So, I think the Me Too's, gearing towards the Me Too's, gearing towards the beginners that without much education, without much ACA courses, that has changed the perception of a whole generation because things are so accessible and so easy.
You're not going to speak to that?
Like trying to think where, which way to go from it. But I think, though, it does speak to the accessibility issue when you look at us, right? We had to actually, just to get the gear in itself was a chore. Like you had to have the passion to go get it and go to the shop and talk to the experts and figure out even just at that level what you needed and what where you wanted to go with it. And with it being so accessible, it's everywhere. You don't kind of have to make that commitment in a lot of ways to be driven and to be the best and to be where you want to go. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. The interesting side of that is kind of two things. When we were talking yesterday about what is the spread of ACA instructors now nationwide as far as age goes, and it is still a pretty good spread. It's not like the instructors that have been around for a long time are the leading group. It's definitely a good spread. Even in membership, it's a pretty big spread of ages across the board. But the flip side of that is so many, back in when things started, it was pretty much the Wild West, right? There wasn't a lot of education around it. You learned from your buddies, you learned from your local experts, wherever it may be. And now everything is requiring like, hey, you should be a certified instructor, or you do need this extra insurance to do this thing, or whatever it may be. So although, yeah, maybe on one side, some certain aspects are making it easier for people, so they're not getting as good or not instructing as well. The flip side of that is that, well, now there's a lot more standards in place that require people to, elevate themselves if they want to have these abilities. So I think there's two sides of that coin to kind of get worked out and improved upon. So.
Something to say, you're good.
I think the bigger part of it is as well. I mean, if I were to design a boat just for me, I could sell 10 of them. But any person in here is from the manufacturing side of it. If you design a boat just for your expert, you're not growing a business. So anybody who's going to try to build a business, to create outdoor retailer, you're always trying to get new users into the sport. So therefore, there are 34-inch wide boats. There's 90-gallon creek boats. People are taking down class 2. So I don't necessarily see that as a fault in the industry. I think education comes along and people to take them to the next level. And I think we're going to continue to see that evolve, and people are able to do so many more sports. So maybe they're not necessarily experts in one thing, but maybe they're generalists and really good at all of these different things. I think actually if it comes down to in retail, it comes down to people skills. It comes down to communication skills, the ability to translate your experience or to talk to them about what they need. And in my experience shopping in outdoor retail, I find that aspect missing more than actual general expertise. It's the human connection of being able to relate to someone one-on-one about that experience. So.
You're talking about the Me Too type thing. I find there's a lot of people being hired as social media people, marketing people, pattern makers. They're all people that are passionate, and all these companies want somebody that come into their business and have a passion for the outdoors. They relate to each other, whether an expert or not. And I think that's what counts, is that, you're talking more on the retail level, but I'm talking manufacturers. They want people who are enthusiastic outdoor people that get along with everybody else. So, or may go on a bike ride with everybody in the office or whatever. So I kind of look at it that way.
Millennials prefer a flat corporate structure and an emphasis on work-life balance, which I think we probably all do. I don't care. And maybe that's how this whole industry started. But the fact is, as we get bigger, and even in small companies, we have deadlines, we have outdoor retailer we need to meet. What strategies are your businesses doing, or your organization, or maybe how are you, Laurel, how are you coaching companies to attract young, how do we sell work-life balance and a flatter structure in a growingly, maturing industry here, but still give that to millennials? How do we, or even ourselves? How do we do that?
I know for myself, I walk from one bedroom to the other to my computer. That's about all I do. So I don't manage any employees. I don't hire them. I don't have a lot of contact with the people that actually post jobs on the website.
But they must read in a certain way. How are companies trying to sell working for them to
they
a gang
do,
of folks that
if they do a good job, on their description, they'll say, this is your passion, you'll live your passion. We want to really respond. They put all the requirements, but one of them is like I said, they want you to be an enthusiast. That's a pretty big deal when people are out there hiring people in the outdoor industry. And they'll oftentimes say, hey, you'll have free time to go do things. We'll give you discounts on your equipment and things like that. So they do entice them by the lifestyle in a lot of the job descriptions.
I know for us, the way we hire talent is find people who are really passionate about our product. And rather than hire them and pay them for hourly performance, we incentivize people to be able to take the product, and I give them as much training as I can to make basically independent stores and reps within themselves that have a lot of autonomy. And I've found that works the best because you're allowing that person to perform and be paid based off performance as opposed to showing up. So for us in our small business of selling prone kayaking, we have several ambassadors who have their own demo fleet that get trained up, that become really passionate about it, that then can go share that passion. They can charge their own rates. They can teach to our standard. And what we found is that works a lot better than being like, hey, show up at this event, we're going to pay you $15 an hour. So I think there's an element from a flat corporate structure of incentivizing them to be autonomous and letting them be paid by their performance.
To speak to the work-life balance, I think it's something that's said a lot, and it's kind of like a buzz conversation to have, but actually having a work-life balance, no matter who you are, where you are within your job or industry, is incredibly difficult. And it's hard to figure out exactly how to do that balance and how to make it work for you. personally, I just came back from my maternity leave a month ago. I have a 4-month-old baby here at the show with me, and I'm very lucky to have incredibly supportive people in my family and people that I work with that have been okay having an infant in the booth. I mean, I luckily was able to bring a family member on my own dime, but with me to come and watch the baby and let me be in meetings and things. But it was more of an understanding this year that I wasn't going to be able to go to some dinners. I wasn't going to be able to go and participate in certain things after hours because I really needed to be with my family that's here with me. But to have a company for me that understands that it's not that I don't want to come, I don't want to put the work in. It's that I really also need to be able to be with my child and support them. It's an interesting thing once you start to actually work with the work-life balance and see how it can fit you and try to make it work for you.
So I had a buddy that was, he's trying out for the U.S. canoe kayak sprint team, and Pat Dolan, and everybody was asking his coach, how are we going to beat Pat? He's just so fast right now. He's winning at everything. And the coach, he's an Australian guy, says, well, quit your job, break up with your girlfriend, and get to training. So, you kind of got to, everything's about balance. Marty and I right there, we go out and paddle on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Mike Chiganowski and all them, and it's because we want to go paddle. And, I mean, I'd say there's about 50 people in production at Winona and probably 20 in the office, and there's, 4 or 5 of us getting paddling, and some of them do it, just recreation, and so you really have to want to, as you were saying, you have to want to balance it, and you have to want to get out and exercise, no matter what industry you're in. A lot of companies, they offer, every other Friday they'll have a yoga class or something, and that's certainly not the case at Winona. But the other day we had a container to load to go to Great Britain, and they said, hey, James, you want to go lift some canoes? And I go, how heavy are they? They're 70 pounds. I go, sure, okay. So that's, that's my workout for the day, and, that's your balance. But, there shouldn't, people in the outdoor industry should not be having issues with the work-life balance since they're trying to promote it. It has to be authentic. You can tell when an authentic salesman's talking to you because, they actually do it. And, I guess encouraging, people to get in, especially college runners, let's say, having shoe companies try and hire them, and with paddlers, just really saying, hey, there is an industry out there for you, a paddle sports industry, and they're going to keep paddling no matter what they do because they love it, So hiring enthusiasts is certainly not a bad call.
It's also apparently not about the money. It's not about the money with
True dat.
with this. So, however, it's really hard to figure out what it is about, because I've tried to pay people more to keep them, like build it not from a resume building job into their next job, but like, look, you're very good at this thing. Let's keep you here. They won't stay. I've tried to be very flexible with schedules, trying to give people more time off to work around our publishing schedule, but they keep. But I think I'm a reasonably okay guy to work with, but they keep leaving, and they keep looking, and they keep traveling. And it's almost as if they don't know what is truly going to make them happy, right? So I guess my question is, how are your organizations or businesses, what are you guys doing, or what have you seen being done to try and keep people there and there longer in their jobs?
Well, I suffer from the grass is always greener syndrome a lot, and I have to, I have to really tell myself, it's really not especially a lot of the time, it's not always greener on the other side. It's just another patch of grass. So, I'm the one being catered to at this, career path. So I don't know. I just like paddling, so I don't really have much of an opinion on this.
I don't know. I found in my life that, I at a time worked really hard at some businesses and had the work-life balance problem at times, but I always exercised no matter what. But I just found that if you keep on working at one thing and you get really good at it and you have an open mind, doors do open for you. And sometimes if you stay at the same place, that's the case. So jumping around from one place to another, sometimes you don't quite get the same experience than really establishing yourself in one area and getting good at one thing. So that's what I found in my life anyway. So.
As you say, it's almost like millennials forget about that whole reference part of the application, you know? You can't just burn bridges, and they seem to do that.
Yeah, I'm still formulating this.
We don't have enough time for that.
Yeah, we don't have time. Yeah. Well, and it's just kind of speaking to your idea about this, these folks might come across as, hey, they're not happy, like they haven't found what they're looking for. And honestly, I think that brings up a good point, and the words come up a lot. It is this idea of passion, right? I think for most of us who have been in this industry, we don't do it for money. We do it for passion. We're, like teachers. Teachers teach because they are passionate about it. They don't get paid a lot of money. Whether that's right or wrong, that's just the way it is. And, I think with this group in these sort of situations, they just really haven't found that passion yet. And I think that's lacking a lot in our society is just, we find that passion. For me, when I first saw kayaking, and I remember the moment that I saw kayaking and what it was and the boat the guy was in and who the paddler was, I remember that. And I was like, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be. That's what drove me to be a kayaker and be a professional and so on and so forth. And then that career expanded as I was more educated and gained more experience and things like that. And so that was my passion. But I think there's a lot of folks nowadays, whether it's millennials or not, that just struggle with finding that passion and then having a passion that's strong enough that the sacrifices don't seem that big of a deal, right? And, once they find that, they stick, they solid until there's some other reason to leave. So it isn't money. It isn't that. It's perhaps that lack of passion and where can I find what I'm looking for to be passionate about.
I agree with that. And I think that a lot of people have watched their parents go through 30, 40 years at a job that it's obvious they truly weren't happy with what they were doing. And so the perspective is, I need to find something that I am not working to live, but or living to work, but I'm working to live. So it's the work-life balance, but it's also finding a job that at the end of the day, you feel like you're actually making a difference. You're actually making a contribution to something. You're not just punching a time clock just to get paid.
Well, I also think it takes a little while for, after enough jobs, enough time, in the business side of it is to know exactly what you're really good at. And when you're good at something, you enjoy it. So it takes a while to figure that out. Your communication skills, I'm really good at anal detail stuff. I'm good at communicating with marketing. I'm good at connecting people. I found over a period of time that I love connecting people. So I ended up with a big job board. I had no idea I was going to do this 15 years ago. It's like, oh, I guess I am connecting people. So it takes a while to realize that. And it takes a lot of jobs to figure that out. That's what I found. So.
And actually, I can speak to that sort of the frustration you're having, and actually not in the professional world, in the education side of things. I had, over the 8 years that I was the director of this academic outdoor program, had many students that were super talented, super driven, seemed really, really like this is what they were going to do. And while they were in the program, they worked super hard, they were driven, they were really, really about it. But then once they graduated, they stopped. Like those opportunities that existed within the program were no longer available on the outside, and they didn't necessarily know how to perpetuate that idea and how to keep that going. And so for me as a director and thing, I was like, wow, I was really frustrated because like you were great. You could have been, or you would have been, or whatever it may be in the industry, but you chose to do this other thing, because they were just probably not happy, probably not passionate about whatever it was that they were trying to do. So, yeah, interesting.
This is my anti-millennial bashing theory. Are you ready for this? Okay. When I was 25, this is 20 years ago, when I was 25, there weren't serious, real jobs. There were no careers when we came out of school. So we floated around and we did raft guiding for $70 a day. We taught paddling, we worked bars, and that actually might have worked out okay, because I don't know if at 25 I was truly ready for a career then. The difference today, I think, is that we're giving real jobs to people in their mid-20s who probably aren't quite ready for real jobs. So my theory is, and I'm going to throw this out to you guys and see what you think of this. My theory is that the idealistic hippies turned into suburban baby boomers, right? And when I hit my 30s, I didn't want to work for $70 a day anymore regarding rafts. I wanted to own the company or do something real and sink my teeth into something. And I think maybe we need to wait on millennials, and all these things, all the stuff that we're talking about right now might just go away when they find what they're looking for. And I don't like to use the word settle down because it's different, but they can be settled inside and sink into something with more commitment. Discuss.
No way, you just killed it. I was done. I got nothing. Yeah, that was good.
Think of the time we could have saved.
I know.
Why didn't you start with that? What?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, I wouldn't agree. Because if you're not going to give a serious job to a 25-year-old, he could have a master's degree and go and make six figures in tech. So, you got to really go, all right, if we're going to make him be broke, but he has the option to go to nursing school and start off at $80,000, then you've made a huge mistake.
Dude, but I'll give you that great job, but you'll only stay there 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, allegedly, that's the thing. You're never going to know if you don't give him a chance. And if you give him a chance, and that's been the trend, that's a bummer. But,
I'll come by the Winona booth next year and see if you're still there.
Yeah. Well, that's because it's -40 in Winona. That'd be the reason.
So I did not go to school for business. I did not go to school for outdoor industry. I went to school for music. It was awesome. It was music business, so I did get part of a business degree and then supplemented it with a minor to make it almost a full major. But I worked in the music industry, and I luckily went to a school that offered co-ops. And so my first co-op, I was sure this is what I wanted to do for my life. I was so excited. I got this co-op at this great place. It's exactly what I wanted to do. And after the 6 months, I wanted to pull my hair out, burn the place down, and run away. I didn't do any of that. You see, I'm not in jail. But I was lucky enough to have the experiential learning so that I didn't become the person that joined their office right out of college thinking, this is going to be great and wonderful, and then really dreading what I was doing. I ended up taking a lot of small jobs, and I ended up doing a lot of projects with my friends. We made music festivals. We did all of this fun stuff, but it wasn't real work. It was a lot of hard work, but in the end, it wasn't really getting me anywhere. So it took finding the fact that, okay, I'm good at event planning. I know that I can organize large groups of people to do all of these things. I'm good at helping people sell their concept and their idea. And it was trying to find the right spot for me after figuring out that was right for me. But, it did take me until I was in my late 20s to really find that. And so I had a few years in there that if people had offered me a nice, high-paying, cushy job, I would have turned and burned. There was nothing I could have done about it. So I completely agree with you. It's the thought that we don't want to get stuck in a place that we will dread going to every single day. It's what makes us run.
I agree with that, but I didn't get to do that. Well, I probably took me about 40 to 45 years old before I started making a decent living and having I led bicycle tours for a living. I did food service. I did everything. But that's where you learn about yourself, and then you find it takes. Maybe you found it late 20s. I found it in my mid 40s. Everybody goes at their own pace, so you can't do anything about that. I've always had the philosophy that I want to be happy in what I'm doing, and I'm not going to do it otherwise. A lot of people don't grow up that way and are too insecure in themselves to go step out and do that. It's a lot of times how you're raised and how your parents have kind of pushed you into areas and given you confidence, I think.
All right, guys, thank you very much for joining us here. James at C4 Waterman, Adam Beliak, Emily from Johnson Outdoors, Laurel from the founder of the OutdoorIndustryJobs.com, Marcel from the ACA. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks,
at Rapid Media, we have a little slogan, and it's paddle forever. So I don't care how old you are. I hope you all paddle forever. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks, Scott.